This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Shiurim, they may not all be at this location, but just reminding you and giving you advance notice that the Shiur in a few weeks may move to a little bit of a different location. It's only 20 minutes away, and expect to see everybody over there in Mirz Hashem. You'll hear about it. You'll hear. We begin Sefer Bereishis, and Be'ezus Hashem, every year we learn the Torah anew. We have new chidushim and new concepts, and Baruch Hashem, Rabbi was mazmin to us really mind-boggling ideas as we embark on our new voyage of the Chamisha Chumshei Torah. So we come to Parshas Bereishis, and we talk about the creation of man. The pasuk says, "Vayitzer Hashem Elokim es ha'adam afar min ha'adama." Hashem created man, dust, from the earth. Vayipach v'yapav nishmas chayim. Hashem blew into his nostril a living spirit. Vayihi ha'adam lenefesh chaya. If you look at the word that the Torah uses to describe the creation of man, it does not say vayivra, it says vayitzer. Okay, you say vayitzer is not so unusual, but actually when it talks about the creation of the animals, it says vayitzer with one yud. Vav yud tzadi resh. And oddly, when it comes to the creation of man, it says vayitzer with two yuds. Vav yud yud tzadi resh. Why is that? And Rashi points out, sorry, it's not interactive, okay? No problem. But just keep that in mind. Vayitzer here is two yuds. Why two yuds? Rashi says, because man was created for two stations. Man was created for his existence in Olam Hazeh, in this world, and man was created for his existence in Olam Haba. Two dimensions of existence. God created man for Olam Hazeh, and God created man for his stay in Olam Haba. However, the Zohar HaKadosh brings down that pshat, the same pshat that Rashi mentions, and then the Zohar says an astounding thing. Zohar HaKadosh says in this week's Parsha, why Vayitzer with two yuds? So first he brings down one creation for Olam Hazeh, one creation for Olam Haba, and then says the Zohar HaKadosh, Vayitzer. The second line, V'ahu Zimna, Kudsha Brichu Ayol Loin B'Shmei. The Rebbeinu Shalom brought up in his name. Right, we know what's the name of the Rebbeinu Shalom, Yud Kei Vav Kei, numerical value what? 26. So says the Zohar, when God created man, He created man with Yud Kei Vav Kei. You could see Yud Kei Vav Kei on the face of a man. But the Zohar HaKadosh adds one qualification, not any man, only a Yisrael. The Zohar says, he begins, V'ahu Zimna Vayitzer Havaya Elokim Es Ha'adam Ilain Yisrael. That refers to the Jewish people. And how did he create him? B'tziyura debeis yudin. With the tziyur of two yuds. Yud, Vav, Beinayu. Rebbeinu Shalom created every Jew with a yud, and with a vav. So what are you talking about? I don't see Yud Kei Vavka on the face of a Jew. You do. Says the Zohar. Please, no interruptions. Please. Two, where's the Yud Kei Vavka on the face of a man? One eye is a yud, another eye is a yud, and the nose is a vav. One eye is a yud, the other eye is a yud, the nose is a vav. That's Yud Kei Vav Kei. Yud plus vav. Every Jew was created with the Yud Kei Vav. One eye is one yud, another eye is another yud, the nose is a vav. And in fact, the Zohar continues that in Parshas Balak, when Bilam was standing at the summit of the mountain and he's looking over the horizon, and he says, Kimei Rosh Surim Arenu, I see from the top of the cliff, I see the Jewish people. What did he see? What did he see? What Streimels? What did he see? He says the Zohar, he saw the Yud, and the Vav. That's how he recognized that the Jewish people were coming. One eye is a Yud, another eye is a Yud, and the nose is a Vav. Says the Zohar, this is what it means. You ready for this? Vayitzer, Vav, Yud, Tsar. God created man with a Vav, a Yud, and a Yud. Got it? Vav, Yud, Tsar. Vayitzer. How did Hashem create man? A Vav, a Yud, and a Yud. But not any man, only a Jew. Every Jew, everyone in this room, you look at them, You look at their face, Yud Kei Vav Kei. Where? One eye, two eye, nose. And the obvious question is, all men have two eyes and one nose. It's not like some people have two vavs, or some have three yuds. I mean, every human being has two yuds and one vav, two eyes and one nose. Right? Most people. It's been a while since, yud, vav, two eyes and one nose. Even animals, a cow, also two eyes, one nose. Most animals, two yuds. So what does the Zohar mean? That Hashem created Yisrael with Yud, Vav, the two eyes and one nose. What does that have to do with Yisrael? Every single creation, every living thing has two eyes and one nose. But yet the Zohar says no. Vayitzer Hashem Elokim. Hashem created Ha'adam, the man. Yisrael Nikra Adam. Ve'ein umas ha'olam Nikra Adam. Yisrael is created with a Yud Kei Vav Kei. That's the question. That's the question on the table. What does the Zohar mean? Vayitzer. Again, the Zohar gets it from the Vav Yud Yutzar. So there's a sefer on Chumash called Or Malay, and it's quoted by the Shvilei Pinchas on Parshas Bereishis. And the sefer Or Malay of Harav HaKadosh Mikasani, he brings an amazing explanation from Moshe Astriher, who is the Mechutin of Reb Tzvi Hersh Mizidachah. You got that? But get what he says. He says the following: that there's a halacha in Hilchos Sifrei Torah, in Hilchos Safros, in Archaim, Hilchos Tefillin, Siman Lamed Beis Sif Daled. In the Dirshu Daf Yomi, the Halacha Yomi, we just learned this a little while ago. So a very important halacha. Halacha is that we know that every ois of the Torah has to be written a certain way, but there's a very important halacha that every single ois in the Sefer Torah has to be mukaf gevil. Mukaf gevil means every part of the letter must be surrounded by parchment. If any part of the letter is not surrounded by parchment, it's pasul. So you say, of course, you can't have the letters touching. It's more than that. Even if the letters are not touching. Let's say you want to write a resh. And the resh, the top of the resh extends till the end of the line. So that means at the end of the resh, there's no parchment around part of the resh. It just goes into the line. Say, well, why is it pasul? It's long enough, it's big enough, it meets the shiur. The answer is it's not surrounded by parchment. Let's say the samach must be completely surrounded by parchment on the outside and the inside as well. So, for example, let's say somebody sticks a pinhole. Through the parchment in a regular area. It's not a problem. If you stick a pin through the parchment of the Sefer Torah, it doesn't pass the Sefer Torah. But if you stick a pin, let's say, right next to a letter, it does not take away any bit of the letter. It's just that now part of the ink is not being bordered by parchment. Now it's being bordered by a hole. It's pasul. There's only one part of one letter that does not have to be mukaf gevil. Anybody know? I believe it's the leg of the hay. The leg of the hay is the only part of any letter that does not have to be mukaf gevil. It's halach l'maish misinai. Maybe the reason is, the hay represents this world. This world, if everything is not perfect, it's also okay. Don't be so... But that's the halach l'maish misinai. That every part of every letter has to be mukaf gevil. So the Sefer Or Malay says like this. In order for there to be a kosher ois, it has to be the right shiur, and it also has to be surrounded by parchment. So the analogy is that the eyes are two yuds, the nose is a vav. Fine. But it also has to be surrounded by parchment. Now, what does that mean, surrounded by parchment? The analogy would be, mukaf gevil means every letter has a boundary, has a border. A Yisrael, a Jew, their eyes have a boundary. What's the boundary? You can't look at everything. Not everything is for your eyes' consumption. There's certain things you're not allowed to look at. You can't gaze at something immodest. You can't smell. Not everything are you allowed to smell. Not everything are you allowed to touch. Not everything are allowed to taste. Our Evarim have boundaries. So therefore, our Evarim are kosher oisiyos. However, the Goyim, their Evarim may correspond to different letters, but the letters are invalid. They're halachically ineligible. They're halachically disqualified letters. Why? Because their Evarim have no boundaries. They have no limitations. They have no gvul. Their eyes, their nose, their mouth, Their faculties are not mukaf gvil, and therefore they do not halachically correspond to the oisiyos of the Torah, and therefore correctly, obviously, the Zohar says that only the eyes of a Yisrael are two yuds, and only the nose of a Jew is a vav. Okay? So you look at a Jew, what do you see? Hashem. Yud Kei Vav Kei. Two yuds, one vav. So you got to watch out. You have to be very careful what you look at. Your eyes are part of the Shem Hashem. You don't want to defile the Shem Hashem. That's what they say, a Jewish nose. What's a Jewish nose? It's a Jewish nose. Jewish nose. His nose is part of the Shem of Hashem. Okay. Rabbi said this is just the first introduction to tonight's shir. Comes the Megala Amukos. The Heilige Megala Amukos. Megala Amukos of Nasa Natar Shapira of Krakow. He had a very good chavrusa. He used to learn with Eliyahu Hanavi. On his kever it says he had Gilui Eliyahu Panim al Panim. Okay? So he writes the following. If you take a vav and you take two yuds, what do you get? You get an aleph. The way you write an aleph, how do you write? If you're any cipher over here? Not yet. But if you want to become a cipher, the first letter you need to know how to write is an aleph. Aleph is a vav, and a yud, and a yud. The Shem of Hashem, the name of Hashem. By the way, all the letters of the Alef-Beis are different ways of coming up with the Shem of Hashem. But the aleph is clear. It's a vav, a yud, and the yud. You ever wonder, why is the vav crooked? The vav is diagonal. And then you have a yud. Why isn't the vav straight? Says the Megala Amukos, it was Adam HaRishon's fault. Before Adam HaRishon ate the fruit, the vav was straight in the aleph. It was a straight vav, and a yud, and a yud. And the proof is your nose straight? Most people, their nose is straight, and their eyes are straight. That's because Halekim Asas Ha'adam Yashar. God created man straight. You have straight eyes and straight nose. Most people's nose are not on a diagonal. Or you can just have a nose job. It's easily correctable. Right? Yud, Vav. Adam HaRishon, when he ate from the tree, you know what happened to the aleph? The aleph became farkrumt. It became a farkrumta aleph. The Vav went on a diagonal. Says the Megala Amukos, where is this maroon? Who said? How do you know? How do you know such a thing? The aleph changed. You're telling me the aleph used to be a straight vav with two yuds? Yeah, says Megala Amukos, here's the remez. You ready? Look at number 7. You say it every single day in Tehillim. Yasoim v'almana ya'odeid. The widow, actually the orphan, the widow, Hashem encourages. What are the Rashi Tevos of Yasoim v'almana ya'odeid? Yud, Vav, Yud. That's the way life was before the sin. And what happened? B'derech Rishoim Ya'aves. The wicked man came along and he made it crooked. Who is that? Adam HaRishon. Now I could never say such a thing, and I don't think you could either. But the Megala Amukos, a man he had Gilei. By the way, the Megala Amukos wrote 252 perushim on the first pasuk in Parshas Va'eschanan. This is explanation number 162. Okay? In explanation 162 of the Megala Amukos, he explains, before the sin, the aleph was straight, it was a straight vav, with a yud, and a yud straight, and then Adam HaRishon came along, and he ate the tree, and all of a sudden, the whole world shifts, everything tilts on its head. The vav became a diagonal vav, and now the yuds are like suspended in midair. How come I never heard that before? Live and learn. That's what the Megala Amukos says. Interestingly, if that's the case, it's quite amazing that David HaMelech, by the way, we said Leil Hoshana Rabbah, that David HaMelech was the Gilgal of who? Adam HaRishon, right? Remember we said the word Adam is Rashi Tevos, what? Daniel? Adam is Rashi Tevos, Adam, good. David, excellent. And Mashiach, perfect. Adam, David, Mashiach. So David HaMelech has a big job to do. What's David HaMelech's job? What do you think on David HaMelech's to-do list? What do you think is the first thing on his to-do list? You got to straighten out the aleph. Right? That's his first job. He has to straighten. On David HaMelech, we woke up in the morning, we went to the refrigerator. What's the first thing it said to do today? Straighten out the aleph. So what does David HaMelech do when he writes Tehillim? He starts Tehillim with what word? Ashrei. What is Ashrei? The letters Aleph Yashar. We got to straighten out the aleph. Okay? That's David HaMelech's first job. Got to straighten out the aleph. That's what it said. That's how we started. Ashrei. Aleph Yashar. There's a Sefer Eretz Chaim on Sefer Tehillim, and the Sefer Eretz Chaim brings down this idea that David HaMelech started Tehillim with the word Ashrei, because Ashrei is, you could unscramble it to read Aleph Yashar. David HaMelech, his first job is you got to straighten out the Aleph. How are you going to straighten out the Aleph? You got to make the Vav straight. Okay. So now the Sefer Eretz Chaim says, and who says that before the sin, the Aleph was straight? Who says that Vav was straight? I mean, we weren't there. None of us were there. Or maybe our neshamas were there. But who really knows what the Aleph looked like before the sin? So he says, I'll prove to you the Aleph was straight and the Vav was straight. You know what the proof is? We say this every Shabbos. Lehagid, how could you tell? Ki Yashar Hashem, how do you know the Yud K Vav K was straight? How do you know the Vav was straight? You know how? Suri! Just look at my tzur, my image. Look at the nose. Is the nose crooked? Anybody ever born with a nose on a 45-degree angle? No. Most people are not born that way. So lahagid ki yashar yud kei vav kei. How do you know that once upon a time the Shem Hashem was straight? You know how you know? Suri! You look at my image. It's not crooked. So Baruch Hashem, Hashem only made the Aleph crooked, and he didn't make the nose crooked. And the job, David HaMelech's task in life was to straighten out the Aleph, to make the Vav and the Aleph straight, and rectify the sin of eating from the Eitz Hadas. So I saw last night, very late, it was already 12 o'clock, and I could have gone to sleep. I was about to go to sleep, and Hashem had Rachmanos on you. And I remembered, maybe I should look at a certain Sefer. I was thinking, should I really get up and get it? I have very few Sfarim that are not in boxes now. And I don't know why. It was probably not even my own Bechira. It was probably Hashem had Rachmanos on you. He wanted you to hear a good shir. So somebody, maybe a Malach came, he pulled me out, and I went to get the Sefer, and I opened it up, and I found number 13. The Agra Dekala, Bnei Yissaschar wrote a Sefer, Agra Dekala on Chumash, and he points out in the pasuk in Parshas B'chukoisai, Ani Hashem Elokeichem asher hotzei eschem me'eretz Mitzrayim miyos lahem avodim. See, people didn't come tonight. They thought the night after Yom Tov, probably the rabbi is going to say some leftover shiur he already gave 100 times. Nice try. You see, you made it here tonight. You have big zechus. Your grandparents probably davened. I don't know, like they probably fasted 100 days in a row that you should be zocher to be here tonight to hear this. No leftovers tonight. Not the food and not the shiur. Everything is fresh, right off the press. The Agra Dekala says like this. The pasuk says, "Va'eshbar moitois ulchem." I will break the pegs of your yoke. Va'oilech eschem koimamios. And I will bring you into Eretz Yisrael. Koimamios. What does koimamios mean? Rashi says, the koim is the kufa, erect, with a straight posture. The Medrash says a little differently. B'shtei koimos, 2 levels. So the Agra Dekala wants to know, what does the Medrash mean? You're going to come into Eretz Yisrael with 2 levels, with 2 stories. And what does it mean you're going to come in erect? Says the Agra Dekala, it's not talking about you. It's talking about the Aleph. The Aleph right now has 2 stories that are discombobulated, that are haywire, that are keeled over. You have the Vav, and you have the bottom Yud. So they're like tilting over, they're falling over. But when Mashiach comes, the Aleph is going to be restored. The Aleph is going to be returned to its original pristine state of standing straight. You know, sometimes you lean over. Your mother says, stand up tall, stand up straight. What are you, a hunchback? Stand up. The Aleph is right now, is angebeugen, right? So you tell the Aleph, stand up straight. Kaimamilos. So the Bnei Yisachar says like this. When Adam HaRishon ate from the Yetz Hadas, what happened to the aleph? It killed over. But there was a brief moment in history where the aleph was straightened out. When? When the Torah was given. That's why Hashem gave us the Torah. With what letter? What does the Asar Tzadibra start with? Anochi Hashem Leikecha. Anochi starts with a aleph. That was supposed to give a kick to the aleph, straighten the aleph out. Anochi Hashem Leikecha. The problem is we sinned with the Egel. What was the first word we said when we sinned with the Egel? Eila Elohecha Yisrael. We sinned again with the aleph. Again, the aleph kills over. Not again. Now I have to be a hunchback until Mashiach comes. But it's all about the position of the aleph. It's all about the aleph. Okay? This is the introduction to tonight's shiur. Then when this is just the introduction. Then when Adam HaRishon ate from the tree, something happened to the aleph. The question is, I don't understand. What does something have to happen for the aleph for? The aleph didn't eat from the tree. It's the aleph's fault that Adam ate from the tree. If anything, I would think if Adam ate from the tree, let Hashem turn his nose upside down. No, the nose stays straight. Well, why is Hashem taking it out on the aleph? What did the aleph do wrong? Why in the world? Because Adam ate an esrog. Because Adam ate the esrog, so now the aleph has to say, what did the aleph do wrong? Why is the aleph changing because Adam HaRishon ate from the Yetz Hadas? Okay, while we're on the topic of the aleph, I want to tell you another secret about the aleph. If anybody asks you what we learned tonight, say very simple things. Tonight we just learned about the Alef-Beis. Not even the Beis. Tonight we just learned the aleph. The aleph is what? 3 letters. Yud, Vav, Yud. The Megala Amukoi says in his 164th explanation on the first pasuk in Vaschanan that we know that with how many modalities of Chachma did Hashem create the world? How many Nesivos Chachma are there?
Lamed-Beis.
Lamed-Beis. Zeir Git. 32 paths of Chachma. In fact, the opening paragraph of the Sefer Yetzirah is the Lamed-Beis Nesivos Chachma Bara Hashem Alma. You have it on your sheet number 17. B'shloishim Mushtayim Nesivos Plios Chachma. Hashem created the world. God created the world. Right? There's an idea, 32 pathways of Chachma. And that's alluded to in the fact that in the opening chapter of Bereishis, Elohim appears how many times? 32 times. Right? You know that? If you count in the opening paragraph in Bereishis, Elohim Ezra Besaras, Haaretz Bayerm Elohim, Bayivra Elohim, Bayitzar Elohim. 32 times it says Elohim, 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 Elohim. Why? Because Hashem created the world with 32 pathways of Chachma. Come Shabbos, Bayichal Elohim. Elohim's done. Elohim's finished. Chachma. The letter Aleph means Chachma. Aleph means to learn. Right? The Gemara says in Masechta Shabbos, Alef-Beis stands for Aleph Bina. Chachma. Well, you know why? Because you have a Yud and a Vav on the top. That's 16. And then on the bottom, you can also look at it. Yud and Vav. The Vav could be used with either Yud. The Aleph itself represents the 32 pathways of Chachma. In fact, there's a tradition that the Megala Mukoi says, we once spoke about this, that every Jew has how many teeth? 32 teeth. 16 on the top, 16 on the bottom. Why? Corresponding to the 32 pathways of Chachma, to teach that you're only supposed to use your mouth and your speech for Chachma. All the rest of the stuff, that's not needed for. Your mouth is used for Chachma. You have 16 teeth on the top, 16 teeth on the bottom. That's why in Shiur HaShirim, there are 2 compliments given to the Jewish people about our teeth. One pasuk says, Shinayech ke'eder harachelim, and one pasuk says, Shinayech ke'eder haketsuvos. Why? Top teeth, bottom teeth. 16 on the top, 16 on the bottom. What are the teeth for? Chachma. What Chachma? 2 types of Chachma. Torah and Tefillah. Torah, of course, we know. How many aliyos are there a week? 3 on Monday, 3 on Thursday, 3 on Mincha by Shabbos, and 7 Shabbos morning. How many? 16. To show the top teeth, they're only for Torah. The bottom teeth are for tefillah. How many tefillah is connected karbanos? How many karbanos a week? Carbon tamid shel shachar bein harabayim. You have 2 carbon tamids a day. 2 times 7 is 14, and 2 extra carbon musafs on Shabbos. 16 karbanos a week. So your teeth, if you want to know why did Hashem give you a mouth, it's either for Torah or for tefillah. Okay, that's what the shlosim. That's another secret of the aleph. But coming back to our question, why is Hashem punishing the aleph? Because Adam HaRishon ate from the tree. What did the aleph do wrong? Why is the aleph killing over? So now we're going to learn a very important concept, and those who have been coming to the Shiurim are probably very familiar with this idea. And that is that when the Rebbeinu Shalom created the world, how did He create the world? He created it with the Torah. But what does that mean He created with the Torah? The Gemara says, Yodeya haya Betzalel letzaref oisiyosh v'hem niver shamayim v'aretz. Betzalel knew how to combine the letters with which Hashem created heaven and earth. Hashem created heaven and earth with the letters of the Alef-Beis. You know how we know that? Bereishis bara Elokim. What do these words mean? Bereishis bara Elokim. It's a very big problem. Bereishis does not mean in the beginning. Does not mean that. If it wanted to say in the beginning, it would have said Barishayna. What does Bereishis mean? Bereishis means in the beginning of. So Rashi's bothered. In the beginning of what? And therefore Rashi says you have to darshan the pasuk, not Bereishis, in the beginning of, but Bereishis, because of Reishis. What's Reishis? The Torah. The Torah is called Reishis, like it says, Hashem Kanani Reishis Darkai. Bereishis, because of the Torah, Hashem created heaven and earth. But there's another way to read it. Bereishis, with Reishis, with the Torah, Hashem created heaven and earth. The Torah is the blueprint of creation. God used the letters of the Torah to create the world. The proof is, listen carefully, Bereishis bara Elokim, S. Hashem created the world with aleph to taf, with the letters S. Letters aleph to taf. Hashem created, the Megala Mukha says that. Hashem created the world with the Alef-Beis. Okay. But we encounter something very interesting. Because when Hashem created Adam HaRishon, you know how tall he was? He was so tall, he was as tall as the sun. He was Meisaifa Olam V'yad Saifai. The ball of his ankle was so bright that the sun was dim compared to the ball of his ankle. He was so holy that the Malachi Asharis wanted to say that he's God. They thought he was God. And then Adam HaRishon eats from the tree, and look what happened to the man. He became a shrimp. He became a weakling. Before the sin, he was going to live forever. He was immortal. After the sin, he's mortal. That means Adam HaRishon was created twice. One time before the sin, and after the sin, he was recreated. And how did Hashem create Adam? With the Alef-Beis. Well, wait a second. If the Alef-Beis created a Superman, then how did it the second time around create this little dwarf, this mortal? The answer is the same way Adam was different the second time around. You have to say the Alef-Beis was different. Because if the creation was different, then the tools of the creation had to have been different. That means whatever the Alef-Beis was before the sin, the Alef-Beis obviously dramatically changed after the sin. Comes Rabbi Eliyahu Gutmacher. Rabbi Eliyahu Gutmacher was the Talmud of Rabbi Kiva Eger. He lived from 1796 to 1874. So I read about his biography. In his biography it says he was a rabbi and a Talmudic scholar. I guess you see from here you could be a rabbi without being a Talmudic scholar, right? That's certainly something we, nice and b'chol yom. But he was a big mekubal, and he was also a big supporter of Reb Tzvi Hersh Kalisher. In his heyday, thousands and thousands used to flock to him for brachas. He was considered a ish tzaddik, a tremendous ish tzaddik. There's one particular thing that he says that's become very well known, very well spread. It's become very important. I don't mean to just you should know where it comes from, right? Nowadays, when you go to a bris milah and the baby cries, so now what do people do?
Pray.
They pray, they daven, right? And this has become that's one of these Soidei Ha'amuna. It's mamish. It's like it's an Aser Sadibros. Yeah, when the baby cries, you must daven. like a Chiyav D'Oraisa. In what Gemara does it say that? You should always daven. It's always good to daven. Which Masechta does it say? It doesn't say it anyway. Where in the Zohar? No. It says, where is it? In the Medrash? No. It says in the Chidushim of Rabbi Eliyahu Gutmacher Masechta Shabbos. That's the Makar. To daven when the baby cries. It's the first Makar. First Makar is Chidushim of Rabbi Eliyahu Gutmacher. It's a very beautiful thing. So you should be aware. If it's either davening when the baby's crying or saying Kriya Shema B'zmanoi, you have to know Kriya Shema B'zmanoi comes first. Then you could fulfill. But certainly but this thing which has become out, it's nispashet b'chol ha'olam. It's a very beautiful minhag. But you should know it comes from the Sefer Chidushay Rabbi Eliyahu Gutmacher. I believe it's his last comment on Masechta Shabbos. So he says like this. He says that if we see that Adam HaRishon dramatically changed after the Chet, that means not only did he change, but the architectural tools with which God created the world must have also changed. Now he doesn't talk about the aleph, but presumably we could apply this reasoning to why the aleph changed. The aleph, the Rebbe Shem created the entire Bria with the aleph a certain way, and therefore the Bria existed in a certain dimension. And after the sin, when the whole world plummeted, well, the aleph also, compared to the way the world used to be paradise. Compared to the paradise that the world used to be, we used to be in Gan Eden Mikedem. Now, you look in the Svarim of the Alter Svabotka and the Arhat Sof, and he says, the world today, compared to Gan Eden, it's like Gehenna. That's what happened. The aleph became all crooked. But listen to this, says Rabbi Eliyahu Gutmacher, it wasn't only the aleph. And he reveals to us that there were another 5 letters of the Alef-Beis that completely changed after the sin of Adam HaRishon. 5 letters? Yep. There's a Gemara Masechta Megillah. Look at number 19. The Gemara says, there's something called Minatzpach. You know what Minatzpach is? And when I was in Yeshiva, they call Minatzpach are the endo letters, right? The endo letters. The final mem, the endo mem, the endo nun, the endo tzadi, the endo pei, and the endo chaf. The Israelis say what? Mem sofit, nun sofit, right? And who's right? Is it enda or is it sofit? They're both wrong. It's neither. Neither. Both of them are completely wrong. Neither has any basis. You know what they're called? The Gemara says what they're called. The mem, the regular mem, is called mem psucha. It's an open mem. There's a hole in it. The nun, that regular nun, is called nun kfufa. It's a bent over nun. The tzadi is a tzadi kfufa, a bent over tzadi. The pei is a pei kfufa. The chaf is a chaf. The chaf that we have is a bent over chaf. But the final letters, the mem is sealed in. It's a mem sesuma. The nun is a nun pshuta, straight. The tzadi is a tzadi pshuta. The pei is a pei pshuta. And the chaf is a chaf pshuta. In other words, you know what the difference is? Before the sin, says Rabbi Eliyahu Gutmacher, there was no such thing as a regular mem. There was no such thing as a regular nun. There was no such thing as a regular tzadi. There was no such thing. These are farkrumta letters. They're all bent over. They're all crouched together. Halakim asas ha'adam yashar. God created man straight. That's why all you have is you had a straight nun, a straight tzadi, a straight pei, a straight chaf. You had a mem, sesuma, a closed mem. You had a nun pshuta, a straight nun. A tzadi pshuta, a straight tzadi, a straight pei, and a straight chaf. Because everything in the world was straight. There was no krumkeit. There was no crookedness. Comes Adam HaRishon and he has all kinds of chaps and cheshbonos and calculations. And when the world plummeted, the mem opened up, and the nun folded up, and the tzadi folded up, and the pei folded up, and the chaf folded up. Herzlichen, listen to this. Where do we see that the mem folded up, the mem opened? Where do we see that the nun folded up, the tzadi folded up? Listen to this. What was the first thing that happened when Adam HaRishon ate from the Eitz Hadas? What was the first punishment that was brought to the world? Misa. And Misa is the general category. Some of the subdivisions of that category are Yisurim, Chayli, Tsar. These are all subdivisions of Misa. What letter in the alphabet, in the Hebrew alphabet, represents Misa? We already learned this. It's the Mem. Right? What's the angel of death called? Samach Mem. The Samach Mem. Right? Before the Eitz Hadas, he was Samach Aleph Lamed. Then with the Eitz Hadas, the Mem is Misa. The Mem is death. Before he ate from the Eitz Hadas, the Mem was sealed up. All Misa was a Bilam Maves Lanetzach. It was all swallowed up. Adam HaRishon ate from the Eitz Hadas, the Mem opened. Now if you look carefully at a Mem, the open Mem, which represents Misa, you have that little piece on top. That piece is the plug. You know, in the old-fashioned bathtubs, you have like this cork, you put it in the hole, right? The top of the Mem is the cork. It's waiting for someone to come along and stuff up the hole and Bila Mavis Lanetzach. That's the Mem. That's what it used to be. Let's talk about the Nun. The Gemara says in Masechta Shabbos, the Gemara says that kids came into the Beis Medrash and they said Chidushim, that even in the days of Yeshua ben Nun, nobody said such Chidushim. They said, what is the meaning of the Nun Kfufa, the bent over Nun, which is the regular Nun, and the Nun Pshuta, the straight Nun? And they said like this: there's a Neman, there's an honest person, there's a tzaddik who's humble, and there's a tzaddik who stands tall and proud. Nun Kfufa, Nun Pshuta. And the Gemara dashes it to mean Ne'eman Kfufa, Ne'eman Pshuta. Sometimes the tzaddik is an anav, and sometimes the tzaddik stands tall. Rashi explains, when is the tzaddik an anav? Ba'olam hazeh, in this world. When does the tzaddik stand tall? In olam haba. Says Rabbi Gumacher. Before the sin, it was like olam haba. So you don't need a nun kfufa. There was no bent over tzaddikim. There were no tzaddikim anavim. That's for olam hazeh. There was no olam hazeh then. It was all gan edem mikedem. So all you had was the straight nun, the neman pshuta. Then the pei. Let's talk about the pei. The pei represents your mouth. The Gemara Masechta Shabbos says, what's the meaning of the bent over pei and the open pei? Sometimes you have to keep your mouth closed, and sometimes you have to talk. Rashi explains, when should you keep your mouth closed and when should you talk? Rashi says, at a time that everybody appreciates learning, that's a time to talk and learning. But if you're among people that have no interest in learning, so you're going to give them a pilpul share, they're just going to disparage it. Sometimes peh should be closed, and sometimes the peh should be pshuta. In Gan Eden Mikedem, it was begeder, b'chulam yoidim oisim miktanim miyad gedolim. It was like a dor deya. It was like umala haaretz deya kamayim layam echasim. It was peh pshuta. It was a straight peh. No reason to keep the mouth closed. Whatever occurred to somebody in their mind was obviously chachmas alekis, and you need to say it. But after the chait, sometimes you got to keep the mouth closed. Says Rabbi Gumacher, all the regular letters are a result of the sin of Adam HaRishon. Before the sin of Adam HaRishon, all letters were straight. So you could look at a word with a nun in it. Let's say the word nekama. So we spell it with a regular nun. No, before the sin, so it was an enda letter. There's no such thing as regular nuns. There were no regular pays. There were no regular. Everything was a final letter, right? There were no final letter. There were no regular letter. There were no mems. If your name was Moshe, you know how you spelled Moshe? Final mem, shin, hey. If your name was Menachem, final mem, final nun, ches, final mem. There were no regular mem. There were no regular nuns. There were no regular any of the regular letters. Mem, nun, sadi, pei, chaf. Says Rabbi Gumacher, if you look carefully in this week's Parsha, when the Rebbeinu Shalom gave Adam HaRishon his punishment, he gave him 5 basic curses. And these 5 basic curses correspond to these 5 letters. Curse number 1 was Misa, death. So what happened? You had a sealed up mem, all death was bila lanetzach. Hashem said, sorry, we got to open up the Pandora's box. We open up the mem. The The Malach HaMavet jumps out of the box. Dun, 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 right? Malach HaMavet comes out. The next curse. Hashem says to Adam HaRishon, Arura ha'adama ba'avurecha. The earth will be cursed because of you. What does that mean? Rashi says, all of a sudden the earth is going to produce fleas, ticks, flies, mosquitoes. What is that representative of? Here you're starting to sit in the sukkah. All of a sudden this little tiny thing, he pecks you over here, pecks you over here, the bee comes. So this little thing that grows in the dust, grows in the dirt, grows in the garbage, he's dominating over you. That's an analogy to Golos, where Goyim dominate us. That's a result of Arura ha'adama ba'avurecha. What letter does that come from? That comes from the Nun. The Nun used to be straight. But now the Nun, you ever realize in Ashrei, there's no Nun. Why is there no Nun in Ashrei, right? Malchuscha, Malchuska Galaylamim. Right, you know that song? What's the next pasuk? There's no Nun. Why? The Gemara says we don't want Nefila. Nun represents Nefila. All of a sudden, the Nun takes on a new form. That corresponds to the klala of Arura ha'adama ba'avurecha. That's the klala of Golos. The next klala, the tzadi. Wow. The next curse that Hashem gave Adam HaRishon is Bi'itzava intiyah. You're going to be sad. Says Rabbi Gutmacher, this is the biggest klala of all. You ready for this? This is a big chiddush. Worse than death, worse than Golos, sadness. Says Rabbi Gutmacher, even when a person enjoys this world, you could eat the best cholent in the world. You could eat the best potato kugel in the world. You could have the best barekas, unlimited. It's so good. There's hardly anyone at the shiur, so you could have triples, right? It's even so. There's an undercurrent of sadness. In Olam Hazeh, there's always an undercurrent of sadness. It doesn't matter how much you have. It doesn't matter how successful you are. There's always something deep down. There's always some nagging sadness. He says like this, even the biggest tzaddik cannot save himself from that sadness. Even the biggest tzaddik who tries his best to be Mekayim, Ivdu es Hashem b'simcha, he tries to be tzaddik pashut. He tries to be a tall and proud and happy tzaddik. Even the biggest tzaddik in this world, he can never do avodas Hashem in pure simcha. He's a tzaddik kafaf. There's some degree of sadness in this world, no matter what. Nobody can be perfectly happy. And that, he says, is the biggest klala of all. And that's the bending over of the tzaddik. That even someone who's righteous, even someone who's serving Hashem, in Olam Hazeh, there's no perfect bliss. Then comes the pay. The pay is like this. Adam HaRishon is cursed that now he has to eat the same thing as the animals. It used to be Adam HaRishon had a different menu than the animals. His mouth was on a higher level. His mouth was a peh pashut. His mouth was a straight mouth, as opposed to the mouth of the animals. No. Now, all living creatures share the same diet, and now Adam HaRishon's pay is a pay kafaf. His mouth is lower to the same level as the animal. And finally, the kaf. What part of the body is the kaf? Let's see if you could guess. The palm, the kaf. The kaf represents the hand of Hashem. Hashem, you open your hand and you give us parnasa. It used to be the kaf was straight. The parnasa came down direct from heaven to earth. Adam HaRishon lay back. The malachim would barbecue every night. Grill and alcohol every meal. Basar and yayin. And they never got tired of it. Rare, well done, medium rare, different types, different sauces. You're thinking, what's so good about that? They knew how to do it, make it different. Different types of wine, dry, semi-sweet, different kinds. Other words, the Hashem's hand was open. The loaves of bread grew on the tree. No work necessary. After the sin, what happened to the kaf? Hashem closed his hand. Now parnasa is difficult. Now Bezeh Asapecha Toichalacha. These are the 5 main curses that Adam HaRishon suffered from. Curse number 1 was the opening of the Mem. Misa was let out of the box. Misa was let out of the hat. The next curse was the Nun. The Nun is what? Nefila, Galos. Now the Nun, Nefila, became dominant. Then came the Itzavain, sadness. That is represented by the Tzaddik. The Tzaddik is no longer tall and happy. Now the Tzaddik is bent over. And then the Pei. Now the mouth, our mouth, we share the same menu as the Behemois. And then finally, the letter Chaf, Parnasa, became very difficult. Says Rabbi Yoel Gutmacher, why is that? Why did the letters change? It's bad enough that we have to suffer. Why did the letters change? The answer is because everything that happens in this world comes about as a result of the Torah. The Torah is the blueprint of creation. The Torah is the blueprint of history. Not just the Torah, the words of the Torah, the psukim of the Torah, the oisios of the Torah, and this is something we learned in the past, but today what we're adding is even the tsuras ha'oisios, the way the letters look, affects man. If for some reason the Rebbe Shem would take one letter of the Sefer Torah and make the gimel with one extra leg, all of a sudden we would grow an extra foot or something. Everything would change. The whole world would change. You know, it's like the way I understand it. You have a guy goes into a laboratory, and he sees a physicist. He's fooling around with an atom. What's the big deal if we just, we just take one proton and we slice it from the... That's the big deal. You're about to blow up the world. That's the big deal. The atom is the building block of creation. Well, that's the big deal with the Alef-Beis. Any part of any nuance of any ice in the Alef-Beis changes the entire makeup of human physiology, human history, the history of the world, and the dimension of all aspects of creation. It happens to be very interesting that this whole idea of Rabbi Yoel Gutmacher, again, what's Rabbi Yoel Gutmacher's chiddush? That before the Ched of Adam HaRishon, there were only final letters, there were only straight letters, and after the sin, then we have the bent over letters. By the way, it happens to be that he's arguing on a different Megala Amukais. Megala Amukais says in Parshas Bahaloischa that there was no such thing as final letters until the sin. That the 5 final letters were a result of the sin. That until the sin of Adam HaRishon, all there were 22 letters of the Alef-Beis, and he says like this: Bereishis bar Elokim, S. You know how Hashem created the world? With S, with Aleph to Taf. That's Parak Aleph of Bereishis. But Parak Beis of Bereishis, which talks about after the sin, what does it say? Eile toldo shamayim va'aretz bihi baram. Hashem created it with a hey, not with Aleph to Taf, with 5. What 5? Mem, Nun, Tzadi, Pei, Chaf, the final 5 letters of the Alef-Beis. Now the world was created with the new 5 letters, not with the 22, with only the Menatzpach. In fact, there's an idea that there are considered 280 bad forces in this world. Begematria Menatzpach, Mem, Nun, Tzadi, Pei, Chaf is 280. That's why when Adam HaRishon wanted to bring a carbon to be mechaper for his avera, what kind of carbon did he bring? What animal? Par. Par is 280. Par is 280. Keneged menatzbach. Keneged, the numerical value. Mem is 40. Nun is 50. That's 90. Tzadi is another 90. 180. Plus 60. Plus the pay. Plus 80, excuse me. That's 260. And then the chaf is 20. 280. Okay, so, but either way, what we're learning is that there were a creation of 5 new letters after the Ched of Adam HaRishon. According to Rabbi Yoel Gutmacher, it were the regular letters of Mem, Nun, Tzadi, Pei, Chaf. According to Megala Amukos, it was the final letters, the final Mem, the final Nun, the final Tzadi. Fine. I'll tell you an amazing thing. Back to Rabbi Yoel Gutmacher. If you look in Sefer Yeshaya, Parak Tes, Pasuk Vav, it's a pasuk about the coming of the Gula Achrona. Le'marbeha misra u'l'shalom ein kates. Look at the word le'marbe. Look how you spell le'marbe. Lamed, Mem, Reish, Beis, Hey. But there is a major anomaly in the word Lamarbe. The Mem, in the middle of the word, is a final Mem. What happened? It's a mistake. You have to roll up the klaf, right? Obviously, Orthodox Jews only relay in Haftarah from a klaf. You have to make sure that your shul has a klaf. Okay? Before you get like fancy chandeliers in the shul, you have to get a klaf for all the Chavdalat Sfarim, so that you're yotzei the Haftarah. Don't ask me, ask anybody. Go to Reb Chaim Kanievsky. Of course you have to have a klaf. If you have a klaf Yeshaya with Lamarbe, Lamed with a regular Mem, you got it, you not a good klaf. Why is there a final Mem in the Lamed Mem Reish Mem? The answer is, says Rabbi Yo Gutmacher, because just like before the sin of Adam HaRishon, there are no regular Mems. All the Mem were the final Mem. Misa was Bila Mavas Lanetzach, was sealed up. Well, when Mashiach comes, and it will be Lamar Bey HaMisra, there will be a lot of authority to the Malchus Beis David, not some authority. David had some authority. Shlomo had some authority. But the Mem still was an open Mem. The opening, the plug, was still waiting on top for someone to take it and seal it up. But La'aseh Lavoi, Lamar Bey HaMisra, U'Lashalom En Kate, when peace will be no end, there will be no regular Mems. We're going to take the top piece, stuff up the Mem, Bila Mavas Lanetzach. Says Rabbi Yo Gutmacher, and he prefaces it by saying that really he has more to say about these things. But unfortunately we live in a time that when people start speaking about secrets, people mock it. It used to be, the 19th century, that if we would give a shiur like what we gave tonight, people would mock it. Rabbi Yo Gutmacher said he couldn't talk about it. He said really he has more to say. He says, V'yesh oid b'zeh ma she'ein lemar barabim. The only people who appreciate things are rak oyave Torah. Only people who love the Torah like a shiur like tonight. Baruch Hashem, over here, everybody loves these types of things. So we could continue. He says, remember Hoshana Rabbah night we said from the Arizal. Adam is Rashi Tevos. What again? Adam, David, Mashiach. So that's what we owe Gutmacher. Okay, the aleph I understand stands for Adam. The dalet stands for David. But a final mem doesn't stand for Mashiach. Final mem stands for Mashiach. Mashiach is with the regular mem. No. Because when Mashiach comes, Mashiach will be spelled final mem, Shin, Yod Ches. When Mashiach comes, the mem will be sealed up. Will be la maves lanetzach. The nun will straighten out, and all the tzaddikim will stand tall and proud. There'll be no golos. The tzaddik will not have any undercurrent of sadness. It will be rak, sala, v'simcha. The pei represents the mouth. We'll eat lechem abirim. Sha'achalish will have mun-like food. And the chaf, the Rebbe will open up his hand and be mashpia on us. Tremendous shefa. But Rabbi, so what we're learning is a very important yesod. That when you learn Torah, you have to understand every word is something with which the Rebbe created the world. Every nuance of Torah is not important, is not critical. It's as important as anything could possibly be. Every detail, every hook, every cranny, every dot, every trup, even the parchment surrounding the letter, every single thing keeps the world going. That's why. Well, why is it somebody leans the Torah, all of a sudden he says one word, Vayidaber. No, Vayidaber! Everyone just jumps on him, everyone's about to strangle him. What did the guy do so wrong? What are you going to kill the guy for? Because he said, yeah, he's going to destroy the world, the Balkari. To say, well, one improper Nakuda? No, every dot is important, every letter is important, every hook is important. And, the Mishnah says at the end of Soita, that Mishames Ram Gamliel Batla Kavod Torah. When Gamliel died, Kavod Torah stopped. Why? Because Gamliel used to learn standing, and then after him, people used to sit when they learned. So people didn't honor the Torah the way they used to. And then the Mishnah says that when Rabbi Kiva died, also Batla Kavod Torah. Why? Because Rabbi Kiva used to darshan every hook, every kutzah shel yud. How is that Kavod Torah? The greatest honor you could give to the Torah is to understand how every minute detail is of critical importance. The rabbi's telling, that's technical. Technical? If you don't know that, maybe the sun is going to move like an inch closer, is going to burn the whole world down. No, it's not technical. The whole world stands on every single detail of the Torah. And Baruch Hashem, with this Hakdama, we should be zoicha to learn Chamisha Chumshei Torah well, to know it well, and Be'ezras Hashem, Rebbeinu Shem should be mashpia on us, shefa, bracha, v'hatzlacha.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.